there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Rock and Roll podcast. Check out this record. My name is Frank, and with me is my good buddy, Mark.
Hey, Frank. Hello, listener.
You can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts, and you can see these mugs on YouTube.
That's right. We release new episodes each and every Friday, provided we feel like it, so you can get your weekend started with a healthy dose of rock and roll. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Rock and roll weekend, right? So if you're hearing us for the first time, we review records. We go track by track, baby. And we have lots of musical discussions. We do spotlight episodes, which might even include some mysteries, right? In the rock and roll world. And we've only scratched the surface and we're just getting warmed up, right, Mark?
That's right. And stop calling me baby. I don't know. Be sure to check out our Verse series where we openly mock Pearl Jam once a month. I did that joke last time.
So good, though.
In our Verse series, we pick two bands or albums or songs or two musical worlds that typically butt up against each other. And we make them duke it out for what the kids call total stereo domination. How's that?
Do you need some water? Are you okay?
Yeah, be all right.
Be sure to check us out on Instagram and our Facebook group. And hopefully these episodes will leave you wanting more of our musical goodness, Mark's random nonsense. Of course, if you have a record that you want us to check out, just drop it. Drop a comment wherever you find this. While you're at it, subscribe, like, give us a review and a rating. And now I get to the part where I say, Mark, how are you, my man?
Frankie, I'm pretty stoked for our episode today. Been looking forward to this. I'm really excited that you reached out and wanted to do what we're doing today. Yeah, trying to push it as though the listener hasn't read the title of the episode yet.
That's right. That's right, my friend. And listen, it's been something on my list that I've been really wanting to get into. As I mentioned last episode, there was no intention behind it. It was strictly a matter of time in my adult years and in my younger years. I can't really tell you the logic as to what was going on there. So, Mark, when I utter the name Black Sabbath to you, tell me what you think.
Atmosphere. Yeah. There's a tangible atmosphere to Black Sabbath records. I think of that heavy tone and the mild sense of doom and darkness looming over you. If we're talking about the Ozzy era, then I think of the kind of town drunk / madman having a moment of clarity and figuring out how to express himself in the midst of all that craziness. Very Lovecraftian. If we're talking about like the Dio era, I'm thinking about, that kind of ethereal spirit that kind of cuts through the darkness. And when we're talking about the other guys, no disrespect to them, but it works. It's just not Ozzy or Dio. So sorry, guys. But no matter who's behind the mic, we're talking about three other amazing musicians, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and a personal hero of mine, Bill Ward. They were raised on rock and roll and the blues and found a way to funnel it into these sounds of darkness that the world had really only know through fantasy books. Now, I need to probably clarify. They probably weren't raised on rock and roll. They came up in its heyday, right? But they were openly really big fans of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, and believe it or not, Fleetwood Mac, but probably that early Peter Green stuff. That's just a guess. So this band totally rules. Talking about an amazing guitarist and a phenomenal rhythm section. Tony Iommi is also known for using something called the tritone or the devil's interval, right? Which is said to give it that dark, brooding sound we all know and love, right? So in short, Frank, my answer to you is when I think of Black Sabbath, atmosphere. What what about you?
Well, and that's great. I love the way you described it. For me, I think of an industrial city in England. ironically titled Birmingham. And I think of four guys coming together to really pioneer what we know as heavy metal. The imagery to me is this industrial town, and it's what we associate kind of with the name, the metallurgy, the chemistry, the periodic table, heavy freaking metal. Like to me, I see all of that happening when I think of this. Of course, heavy was also a frequent term used by the kids of the beatnik and later the hippie counterculture. So some of the origins also could have come from that as well. But when I think of like Black Sabbath and heavy metal, I think of the industrial scenery and stuff like that. So Mark, Ozzy Osbourne, of course, he was massive when I was a kid. And I remember him, my first memory was accompanying the British Bulldogs in WrestleMania 2 to the ring, which is pretty crazy. And he had the salmon, yes, salmon, covered suit. So before his Black Sabbath music came to my ears, this is how I was really introduced to him, was actually during the rock and wrestling time of the popular 80s. So what about you?
Was that when you say he was covered in salmon? Was it the color or the fish?
No, yeah, it was the color. His suit was a salmon-colored suit.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if he was wearing a suit of fish.
No, well, I mean, that would have been amazing, but
like, man, I thought I probably would have heard of that, but this is new. Yeah, so I think like a lot of people, I was introduced to Ozzy's solo stuff, or at least kids our generation, Frank. I was introduced to the solo stuff way before Sabbath. I actually had in the ninth grade that Ozzy T-shirt of him hitchhiking and he's holding the sign that says "Hell"
yes
on it. And I remember being in high school and this like fucking snot-nosed kid that I probably thought was like the coolest kid because he was talking to me about rock and roll, but he gave me the hardest time about liking Ozzy and not knowing any Black Sabbath. The truth was I just hadn't made it there yet, right? Like I was just some dumb kid. I hadn't gotten that far yet. So I went out of my way. I found some Black Sabbath CDs, and there was certainly a lot out there. There were some cassettes I had, and I just found them to be, pound for pound better than Ozzy's solo work. There are a handful of Ozzy singles that are cool, but I think when you compare Ozzy's work with Sabbath and Ozzy's solo work, it's easy just to go, yep, you know what? There are some great Ozzy albums, but especially the first 4 Sabbath albums, it's hard to argue that any of his solo shit's better than that. So that's kind of how I was introduced to him, just kind of, high school kids picking on each other for not knowing what was cool yet. And Sabbath came up, I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. Now, question for you, because you're really more savvy into them than I am, and straight up question: do you think they were the true originators of the heavy metal genre?
Yeah, let me be very clear about this. Abso-fucking-lutely.
There you go.
There are those that will argue that Led Zeppelin is the first heavy metal band because Led Zeppelin 1 came out before the self-titled Black Sabbath debut. Interesting, worth noting, Black Sabbath wasn't so goddamn cocky that they named every album Black Sabbath 1, 2, and 3. They just named the first one that and then went on with their lives. Anyways, if you listen to those 2 records in a relative time span, right? You don't got to listen to them back to back, but put them on in the same day, you were listening to 2 different genres of music easily. The difference besides tone was that Black Sabbath was playing a minimalistic but brutal form of rock and roll, where other bands like Led Zeppelin played a more elaborate, over-the-top composition. Black Sabbath was focused on power and intensity. And I'm not crazy about Led Zeppelin, but they were a fantastic hard rock band. And I think that's the credit they deserve, as being a hard rock band. Just because Jimmy Page stole all those songs from unknown blues artists and totally never paid them for it and is a piece of shit has nothing to do with the fact that they were a great band. He just happens to be a terrible human being. That's his problem and not mine. But we can discuss Led Zeppelin another time. Let's talk about a band that totally rules, the mighty Black Sabbath.
That's true, and I really like the way you put that too. By the way, like the Led Zeppelin songs are so like cinematic, right? They're almost productions, and Black Sabbath did have this minimalistic view of things. And I always think of two songs real quick that maybe they drew some influence from,
Mhm.
Helter Skelter from the Beatles, and
Sure.
then another Beatles song, I Want You, She's So Heavy, the Lennon composition in
Yep.
Abbey Road. I think those maybe could have snuck their way in there. Not saying by any means that they originated heavy metal. Obviously, I do agree with you that Sabbath did, and they were the first heavy metal band. But if they were into that, they could have definitely been pulling from there. So let's continue. So formed in '68, right? Guitarist Tommy Iommi, drummer Bill Ward, bassist Geezer Butler, and of course, vocalist Ozzy Osbourne. Fast forward to February of 1970, and we get the debut and self-titled album featuring the then terrifying title track, Black Sabbath, The Wizard, the track NIB, and Evil Woman. Then later that year in September, the album Paranoid came out with signature songs we all know, right? Iron Man, Paranoid, War Pigs, and more. Mark, again, since you're the savvy resident with Sabbath, your quick thoughts on those two classic records.
Yeah, my pleasure, Frank. The self-titled debut is really an amazing record all on its own, right? This is one of those there is nothing that sounds like this moments in rock and roll history. They really, this was a bomb going off. This was that straightforward, minimalistic, brutal sound that I was just describing, especially the first record. There's a story about Ozzy bringing it home and putting it on for his dad, and his dad looking at him terrified because he had no idea what was happening. I mean, it's pretty great.
I mean,
Um,
jeez.
yeah, it's often imitated, and attempts to duplicate it are, attempts to duplicate it and its raw power and emotion are everywhere, but almost always fall short of what is truly a masterpiece in the first self-titled release from Black Sabbath. Paranoid, on the other hand, is really known for all of the big Black Sabbath hits, right? Frank touched on it: Iron Man, War Pig, and Paranoid. And as you said, there's also Planet Caravan, Electric Funeral, which is amazing. There's a killer Pantera cover of Planet Caravan out there. And I've heard some really cool Electric Funeral covers. And of course, one of my personal favorites, it's a song about punks, fairies wear boots. Um, it was more about like skinheads who weren't so much racially motivated back then, but they were kind of the punks of the world, and they were too stoned. Black Sabbath would be too stoned to really understand them and for them to understand Black Sabbath. So they'd fight a lot, and that's where that song came from, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
We see the band stretch themselves thematically beyond kind of the macabre, though it's still definitely there in their underbelly of their sound, and address the dark and dirty world that they come from. Right, a lot of what Frank talked about being from Birmingham and what that world really meant. What's truly amazing is that we're able to crank both of these legendary albums out in the same year. I mean, like two amazing records within 12 months. Absolutely astounding. Gives me like just goosebumps just thinking about how cool these records are, how close they came out, and what they did for rock and roll. Like it really changed so much.
Can you imagine putting on a record for somebody and they have no way to identify it with anything else that's out there? Like, just when you said that, I was just like, my God, think about that for a second. I mean, you put something on for somebody and they're like, I don't even know what this is. I mean, that's
Right.
an incredible
Yeah, and
moment.
then they think you're possessed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right after that, they think you're possessed. Man, so we arrive at this album, Master of Reality. 50th anniversary coming up this year on that, which is crazy. Regarded as the foundation for doom and sludge metal and stoner rock. Listen, negative as the light shone on it in the beginning, but like many records, we have seen it eventually become a favorite of the fans and the critics, and that's exactly what we have here. Tony Iommi downtunes his guitar not one step, 1.5 steps, for the purposes of reducing the string tension, making the guitar less painful to play. Why is this? This was due to Tony's injury at a factory accident years before, when he had the tips of his fingers severed on his last day of work. Whew, crazy. Geezer Butler would also do the same with his bass too. This really made for a darker sound, and shocker, Ozzy doesn't have much memory with the recording of this album, which is pretty funny. But listen, we get 8 songs here at 34 minutes and 29 seconds. So unlike last week's album where we had 17 songs going over an hour, this is short, compact. So every song really matters. Mark, how important do you think this album is compared to the previous two Sabbath records?
It's a great question, Frank. You know, what's so cool about this record is hearing the band really slow things down without losing their signature sound or intensity. There is this sense that they're walking the line between heavy metal and blues and this jazz influence that just pokes its head in and out occasionally, and you can really tell the craftsmanship that is going into this. You know, I think one of the things that stoner rock and doom metal are really looked down upon for is the simplicity of it, right? It's just slow, it's and it's too loud, and all we're
Yep.
doing is making
Steady pace. Yep.
steady paced noise. And this is the record that built the mold that you can take it at this toned down pace, play with tempo, play with your pacing, add some really cool parts in here. There's some really great guitar work in here. It's phenomenal drumming in here, phenomenal bass playing in here that really allows them to take that template, that slow, always pushing movement, and really fill it in with fantastic musicianship. So this record really set the tone for a lot more than just what Black Sabbath would do. It set the tone for what would become a few different subgenres of rock and roll and heavy metal.
Right, absolutely. You mentioned something like stoner rock. So the first band I think about that most people would know is like Queens of the Stone Age, right? Which has that tag as well. Well, that's an offshoot of what Sabbath, right, was doing. So like you said, it kind of then expanded in all these different directions for those who come after to pick up and take and run with it too. And that's pretty awesome when you really think about that. So alrighty, Mark, let's do it. Let's get into the album. Start us with chatting about the first track, Sweet Leaf.
All right, now, won't you listen? Great opening track. I love that they intentionally throw the listener off with that echoed, jarring coughing, only to launch into, again, that steady, heavy downbeat-driven blues number that just takes time to build and build. And it's not just building in pace, but intensity. You know, we got Bill Ward and Tony Iommi coming together like on the back half of this for this wild guitar solo where Bill Ward's doing a drum solo underneath it, and the whole thing shapes and works perfectly. It's fucking rad, dude. Big shout out to Bill Ward for killing the gong as the song rolls to an end. You just get this gong crushing in the background. I think Frank and I will probably say this a lot, this record. If you're listening to this, or if you're going back to listen to this record when we're done, you need to turn that thing to 11.
Yeah.
Turn it to 11. It sounds so good. Blasting into your ears.
Yeah, this is the band's love letter to cannabis, and it's starting off with Iommi coughing and all. I guess again the foundations for the stoner rock. That could have been where it came from musically. This song is just a driving force. I mean, powerful chord progressions during the verse, and Iommi's playing is just completely spot on. To me, this song, in my opinion, has an archetype for what bands would start doing in the 90s. I think Sabbath is just one of those bands, again, that's influenced more than just metal. To me, this could also pass as like pre-grunge. Playing this song low, again, does not do it justice. As Mark said, you need to play this loud. And fun fact, this was sampled in the Beastie Boys' Rhymin' and Stealin', which is the first track on their first album. So fun little tidbit there. Next, we get a track I love, I absolutely love this track. It's After Forever. So written by bass player Geezer Butler, who was brought up Catholic, in a response for the band being tagged as Satanists. As a practicing Catholic, I completely relate to this song, and it's one of those that almost brings on my anxieties thinking about this world and potential others well after forever, as the song says. It's a struggle. I'm not ashamed to admit it. To the music, though, the music is forceful. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I love the guitar tones. I'm really falling in love here with Iommi's work, and we're just gelling on so many different levels to create some high quality tunes here. I love this song. Mark?
Yeah, this song, for being extremely kind of pro-Christian, totally rules. Uh, I think people weren't paying attention or chose not to notice that the band literally always wore giant crosses.
Yeah, exactly.
But whatever. Look, Geezer Butler, that is, doesn't get the credit he deserves. In fairness, he's in a stacked band, right? Frank is slowly falling in love with Tony Iommi because he should be, right?
Yes.
Ozzy's amazing. Bill Ward's just this monster on the drums. And Geezer's no slouch on the bass. And he's kind of the Dee Ramone, excuse me, of Black Sabbath, where he quietly wrote a bunch of all of their songs and, just kind of was hanging out in the back collecting a paycheck.
Quietly.
Yeah. And just, kills it. But again, superb bass player, wrote some amazing song. And this song really is just, it's got that classic galloping Black Sabbath guitar that we all know and love. And it's a really good Ozzy performance. This is probably one of his, despite him not remembering any of the recording process, one of his better recordings. It sounds super clean. I mean, certainly Frank and I were listening to this on Spotify, so it was a recent remaster, but the remaster is super clean.
So good.
Ozzy's vocals are spot on. They feel earnest, which is great. He doesn't deliver them sarcastically. You feel him deliver these lyrics as though he means them. This song totally rules, man. Totally rules. Couldn't agree with you more. Track 3, Embryo. This is how I learned to spell embryo. In previous albums, the Black Sabbath would just kind of glue interludes and bridges from one song to the other just at the end of track, right? That's why those first 2 records, it's War Pigs / Luke's Wall, this song / that song, and that's all they were doing. They were just gluing them together. In this one, they separate them out, so Frank and I are going to talk about them individually. It's just kind of beautiful. It's just a standalone guitar work that really transitions beautifully into the next track.
Yeah, one of 2 interludes on the album. It's a great showcase, I think, for Iommi to play on some scales. And as Mark said, leads right into the next song, which is Children of the Grave. Again, a fantastic build up to Ozzy's vocals. We get anti-war themes like in War Pigs. In a quote from Ozzy, he says about this song, that's a happy song, actually. My interpretation of that is that in every generation, there's a new revolution. Every generation hates something about the current generation. So the youngers obviously hate something about the current generation. It was our punk song, If You Like. Now, this is 1971. This is me talking now. This is 1971. We're a few years away from the terms freak out and punk being circulated around. However, I could totally see how this could be looked at another early form of something. And I'm actually surprised it's not referenced more as a potential starting point. It's a really good song with the anti-war theme. It sounds like that war. So, to me, it could be one of those that people maybe don't look at as a starting point for these other forms of music.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, man. You really feel a lot of the band's influences from the 60s here with the lyrical content.
Yes.
Musically, we're getting a really wide swath of influence. That galloping guitar right up front, just kind of like pushing you out of the gate. The whole band just kind of jams in and just brings it to a roar. Again, listen to this record as loud as you can. It rules. Excuse me. The additional pounding drums in the background, like tanks out of sight, rolling around you somewhere like a block away, destroying houses or buildings or whatever. You don't know what's going on. You just know that there's a rumbling behind you and it sounds amazing. It just adds this layer of depth to the song that really just drives this message home of this anti-war, pro-peace message, which for a bunch of Satanists is kind of crazy. It's just such an iconic number for them. Plus, the use of that devil's tritone here to bring the horror of war to life, right? We can't not talk about how awesome this guitar solo is, because it totally rules. Tony Iommi is forgotten way too often when people make lists of awesome guitar players. This dude,
I agree,
totally fucking rules. I got a thing later where I'm going to talk about somebody making a giant mistake that involves Tony Iommi, but I'm all the more grateful for it. because this dude rules. There's a killer solo in that thing. It's just amazing. Mwah. Love Children of the Grave. Such a great song. And you know, to your point, Frank, I think because War Pigs was such a hit, Children of the Grave tends to get overlooked.
I could see that. Yep. Okay. Got
it. That's just my theory.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. It really does.
At number 5, it's the reason I learned to spell the word orchid. It's orchid. Yeah, I really like the use of these interludes on the records. It's so much so that Frank really does a great job of summing it up. Frank?
It's the second interlude, right? And Naomi said he didn't really play acoustic that much. Well, you know, he does this extremely well, and this is like it's almost a dreamscape of a song that brightens up what thus far is a very heavy feeling album. For as particular as I am with albums and their structures, I welcome this. It's not overly long, and it breaks the songs up to make you kind of hear these things in the albums that become more memorable. And this, to me, actually is a very memorable interlude, especially with the acoustic guitar in there. And then we go right into track 6, "Lord of This World." I love at 30 seconds, that 30-second mark in the song, we get this change in tempo. Topically, we're hearing how people do evil instead of love, and really how it doesn't matter at the end of the day when we move on. So the Lord of this world, is Satan, as he's the almighty representation of seduction. It's all within us, right? It's just a matter of if we do our best from making its presence known. I love again the Iommi riffs. The bass is super heavy. It's like a bunch of boulders just falling on the highway. I absolutely love this track. Mark?
Thanks for not getting too Catholic on us there. I'm just kidding. No, great visual description of this song, buddy. That the boulders hitting the highway really kind of does do a great job of describing the sound, the unrelenting weight of this, right? Really great description. Interesting that they put the intro on it after the interlude, right? Because they could have picked up at that 30-second mark where Frank mentioned, just a quick little right into it. Especially because this is a 5-minute song. It always just kind of keep moving and exploring itself and changing sounds and doing some really cool stuff. It's interesting the way Ozzy sings this as he changes perspective from verse to verse, leaving the narrator as an ambiguous figure. I'm prone to agree with you that he's probably mostly speaking from the point of the devil, Frank.
Right.
But he leaves it to the listener to decide if he's talking to the devil or if it's the devil himself talking. It's really
right, which is great. Yeah.
Great storytelling, way to keep the listener engaged and involved. And especially if you're psychopaths like me and Frank, we're trying to, we always hear that artists say like, oh, I'm just putting words together. They don't mean anything. Yeah, that's cool. Except now that you put them together, they mean something. So what does that something mean? And this is a fun one to kind of play with, right? Really kind of getting into that hooky of good and evil. I just love it. I love the use of that muted cowbell as a bit of a breakdown before breakdowns were a thing, right? Again, pre-hardcore by 20 years, they threw in 2 really cool, instead of a China cymbal, it's a muted cowbell, 2 cool breakdowns. Musically, they keep pushing it into different directions that just keep, me glued to my speakers with it.
No, same here. Absolutely
love that track. Track 7, Solitude. Man, we're flying through this record, dude.
I know. It's not a 17-track album.
Right. Flute. It's not just for Jethro Tull. Oh, they came up again. I'd go as far as to say this is how Black Sabbath approaches something like a ballad. Somber, remorseful. This song balances so nicely against the heavy drive of the rest of this album. And it serves as a bit of an extended breath of fresh air, right? The interludes, you get a little bit of air from that kind of really crushing, galloping sound. This one, they're letting you in a little bit more. They're showing you they're not just a one-trick pony, but they're letting you relax a little bit, right? They're maybe a false sense of security, if you will. I really love this song choice, the placement of it. This song could have been cliche as fuck, but and people would have just mocked Ozzy for it, as they do later on in his career when he gets cliche as fuck. But this is just like an almost amazingly personal performance you feel out of him. I really dig this track. I love its placement on the record. The way they changed sounds for this and opened it up to a wider audience in that way.
Yeah, totally with you. I mean, Ozzy's vocals here have a delay, which gives it that layered voice sound. It's almost like, oh, is this Ozzy? But it is. It is absolutely. Iommi is playing the guitar, the flute, the piano on this track. Listen, the song's about breaking up with someone, and the guitar in the beginning being played in solitude really just sets the tone, right? Then Ozzy comes in at first, and like I said, doesn't even sound like him, but there's a desperation here, and not only his voice, but all the instruments that are played, and it's so quiet, and it's like they're almost being played on their own again in solitude, and it's those attention to details that are displayed here that really make the difference between something being good and something being legendary, right? And this definitely is the latter. Ozzy also shows that he could legit sing here. I mean, it's a beautiful tune showing that this band is more than what the average fan may think, more than what I thought too. Yeah, yeah. With the last track here, Into the Void. This is known as James Hetfield's favorite Black Sabbath song, and Eddie Van Halen listed it as one of his all-time favorite riffs. Listen, I love the dystopian future feel and the nature to this song. It adds more texture to it, and at the 3-minute mark, the tempo picks up, and we get fast here, which is cool. Could this be the seeds here for what could eventually be thrash metal? Maybe that's why Hetfield really took to the song a lot. This song makes, it's like another color to the palette that would eventually make up metal for years to come, and I think it's a great closing track to this record. Another song I absolutely love. Mark?
Yeah, you don't hear me do this often, but I totally agree with James Hetfield and Eddie Van Halen on this riff, man. This song rules. Seriously, what an amazing opening riff. Talk about a 6-minute song that has every opportunity to get boring and cliche.
Oh my God.
These dudes were just blasting a new line in the sand, and they used dynamite with this badass number. I mean, they really changed the game, and Into the Void is just one of those tracks that really, really does it. We build into this classic 2/4 sway. Ozzy delivers the goods with his singing on this one. He really brings it. You get that tempo change Frank mentioned, and the drums just trample your expectation as Tony Iommi drives the band headfirst, literally into the void, with you kicking and screaming the whole way. It's fucking amazing.
Oh my God.
We then return to that classic sway. Bill and Geezer never let you breathe. They just keep pounding you with this groove, and really just so that Tony Iommi can come back and just kill you with solos that just never quit. This song is so fucking awesome. Excuse me.
It is. It's amazing.
Just so that they can slow it down and show you how powerful they can do these quick little stops, just so that Iommi can riff off of them, and then back to blasting your eardrums into fucking smithereens. Turn this album up, destroy your hearing. It's worth it. The song fucking rules, and ends the album with it leaves you just racing to turn the record over and turn it up, because it's just so good.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So final thoughts, before we get into that top 10. So here we go. I could see in 1970 playing this then new style of heavy guitar focused music with dark theme. I could see that would tag them as Satanists, but there's so much more to them than just saying that, hey, this is what they were. This album is a really an amazing piece of music that, in fact, it's 50 years old. It's incredible because to me it still sounds new. Each song, including the instrumentals, carries their own elements of influences that others would take and emulate, right? From the downtuning of the guitars to the steady pace tempos, to mid song tempo changes, to pomade verses, to riff centric choruses. This album shows you it doesn't need to be 17 songs for it to be impactful. With regards to the themes, yeah, it's dark. No shit, it's heavy metal, right? I mean, but there's some vulnerability here as well.
Oh, you made me cackle, you son of a bitch.
There's vulnerability here, not, but it's not like emotional vulnerability in a relationship or in a love sense, but more the dealing with those emotions. In in a different way. I could see where the stoner rock came from, but I could also see where other genres and rock really looked to this for some guidance. I think the Master of Reality title is fitting, as it is with all these themes where it puts ownership on you, saying you are the master of your reality, which is how I took it. There are temptations and some messed up stuff along the way, but it's your choice how you want it to shape out. This album's incredible, Mark. I'm glad you mentioned not only this one. I'm glad it's the 50th anniversary, so we are able to talk about it. To me, I have 8.59, but it's 9.5. It's amazing. What else can I say, Mark? Your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay. In case you missed it, I think this record fucking rules. I'm with you on this one, Frank. It's only a 9.5 and not a 10 because this could have been 17 tracks and I'd have been happy. Provided that it just kept going like this, because this record rule, it's so well balanced. It fucking rocks. I mean, when Frank mentioned he wanted to get more into Sabbath, we started here for a few reasons. Like reason number one being that whether he knew it or not, he was super familiar with Paranoid. And not that that's their best record, but it's got all the hits on it. And it doesn't do as much as this record does in terms of really stretching what it is heavy metal is going to be. And I think when you listen to Master of Reality, you hear that depth and you hear that emotion that Frank was just talking about. And it comes across in a much heavier way. Reason two is that it's easily my favorite Black Sabbath album. So
Nice.
thanks, Frank. Again, amazingly balanced. We get some of the best musical performances from each member of the band in the discography. And lastly, it's got all of the amazing deep tracks we literally just talked about. War Pigs is cool. Iron Man rocks, but Into the Void is an epic unto itself.
Beautiful.
Children of the Grave fucking rules. Sweet Leaf is literally a gateway drug into heavier and heavier sounds. You like how I did that?
I do.
And we should all be grateful. I'll park that right there because otherwise it's just going to turn me into
we're gonna do the review all over again.
Right. Honestly, and I had a great time revisiting the Black Sabbath catalog this week, just getting back into it, enjoying those earlier Ozzy records, doing the Dio albums. The other guys, those records aren't amazing, but they're cool. They're fun. There's certainly some interesting stuff in there. But this is kind of the best of the best when it comes to Black Sabbath. And if you disagree with me, that's between you and, the master of your reality. So what do you say? I did my score, right? I did 9.5 because the only way to get better is if it were longer. So why don't we jump into, we're doing top 10 Sabbaverse things. So each of our 10 favorite things from the Black Sabbath universe.
Yep. All things Sabbath.
All things Sabbath. You want to kick it off or you want me to go?
I'll go real quick if that's cool. I'll start. So this is something I mentioned earlier. Number 10 for me. Again, WrestleMania 2. Call me Lars Fredrickson here. Go ahead, Mark, say it.
Lars Fredrickson.
But I love old school wrestling. I mentioned this earlier, but this is one of my first memories of Ozzy, so that's why it makes this list. Again, he wasn't covered in salmon, but he had a salmon-colored suit on, and he was with Captain Lou Albano. It's just awesome. 80s rock and wrestling. Ozzy was there. It's awesome. That's my number 10. What about you, sir?
Number 10 for me, I have Mr. Zakk Wylde. I'm a big fan of 90s Ozzy, and the sound he got with Zakk Wylde, most notably of Black Label Society, was just amazing. I'm not a huge Black Label Society fan. They're fine. I'm just not, I've never gone out of my way to listen to them. But his work with Ozzy is just so good and clean. He's probably the best at filling Randy Rhoads' shoes as anyone who's ever played with Ozzy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, very cool. Very cool. Next is something else I mentioned again was Iommi's fingertips. So at the age of 17, he lost his fingertips, as mentioned earlier. This occurred after an industrial accident at the sheet metal factory, and he was told he would never play again. Well, That's it. That's my number 9.
He had little rubber tips put on his fingers. Pretty fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, number 9 is Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Not just the song, the album rules. Probably the last great one to feature Ozzy. But that's up to you. We could have listed all the Sabbath albums or ranked all the Ozzy Sabbath albums or something. But they're so personal that it's not really worth it. This one for me just happens to be one of those great records that sets itself apart from the first two, sets itself apart from this. It's just a great record. It's definitely, when you got some free time, Frank, be sure to check it out.
Yeah, I mean the track I know off the top of my head in that album is Sabracadabra, and I love it. So that's a great track.
Yep.
All right, so my next one is just the vocalists, right? So the lineup changes. I know that could be a headache, but having a band that had Ozzy, Ronnie James Dio, and Ian Gillan, I mean, even though he was for one album, but if you just think about that for a second, having a band that had these 3 singers, it's pretty damn remarkable, man. Pretty damn remarkable. So just that whole aspect to me made my top list.
Yeah, absolutely. So my number 7 is I wrote Jackie O.
Jackie O.
Something about Jackie Onassis. Oh, wait a minute. When you remember the show The Osbournes?
Yes.
That was a massive fuck off TV show when we were younger, and people couldn't stop watching it.
And they're obsessed with it.
Yeah, for whatever reason. Well, I don't know. It's not for whatever reason, because of genetics, and my English history or background, right? My whatever that is. I looked like Jack Osbourne at that time. I was a chubby kid with a bad haircut and kind of looked like Jack Osbourne. I'm not saying it got me laid, but I'm not saying it didn't. Thanks, Jack.
I remember the first time meeting Mark, and right, when we were in the band, and you come in, and you made a reference to that. You're like, I know they say I look like Jack Osbourne.
I really did. To the point where I would go as Halloween, I think 2 or 3 years in a row as Jack Osbourne, and nobody gave me a hard time. They were like, "Oh, I guess he must dress different in real life. It just looks like he's wearing regular clothes."
That's so awesome. Number 7 on my list is Lita Ford. So Iommi was once engaged to the metal goddess. Yeah, Lita Ford. I had no idea about that, but that was pretty cool. And of course, she did the Close My Eyes Forever song with Ozzy, which would probably have been my second memory of knowing about Ozzy in the 80s, which was that video was massively rotated when MTV actually wanted to play music. So yeah, Lita Ford, that was next on my list. Mark?
I love when you dad complain about MTV.
Always. So old.
Next, number 6 on my list is Mob Rules.
Mob Rules.
So the second Dio Sabbath album, it might be my favorite of his Sabbath albums. There are only the 2. It's just a rad album that gets overlooked. So I wanted to bring it up because it's a cool record. It's Ronnie James Dio. You know that he sounds amazing in it. It's just a great record. Like I definitely recommend, if you're gonna stretch yourself into that Dio catalog, check out Mob Rules, man. That's a fun record. Ironically, though, Mob Rules and what's the name of the first record he did with them?
Heaven and Hell?
I'm sorry? Was
it Heaven and Hell?
Heaven and Hell, yeah. The opening riff for both albums kind of sound the same. But I like Mob Rules. I think it's the better record of the 2. They're both great records.
I was going to say, Heaven and Hell, I enjoyed that too, actually.
Yeah, there's something about Mob Rules. To me, it's just got a little bit more kind of like, you could feel that things weren't going well with the band, and then it came out musically, and like, they were really pissed off. I think it's a cool record.
Cool. Number 6 for me is Pat Boone. Yeah, so Ozzy was once neighbors with singer Pat Boone, and my only response to that is I could only imagine what that dynamic was like. So that made a list. So he was friend or neighbors with Pat Boone.
All right, there you go. So for me at number 5, I have Jethro Tull. They've come up a few times this evening. Tony Iommi supposedly left the band back when they were called Earth. Which is interesting because apparently they stopped calling themselves Earth because there was another British rock band called Earth. I don't know, man. Hey, look, it was the late 60s. They did so they were apparently hippies at some point. Whatever. Anyway, so he left to join Jethro Tull, but quit after a week of early morning practices, right? That's the story Tony Iommi gives. You know, they did these early morning practices, he wanted out. Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull would later claim that Tony wasn't cutting it on account of his disability,
No.
and that he wouldn't be able to play the parts that Ian wanted him to play. What dick blames a dude for his disability? Turns out it worked out for us, though, in the end, didn't it, Frank?
It sure did.
And I don't have to listen to Jethro Tull. Fuck you, Jethro.
That's right. And there's no way they could have won like best metal album of the year when Metallica released the Black album. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
Crazy.
Mhm.
All right, number 5 is Barbara Bush, former President George W. Told Ozzy that his mom loved his stuff. Was that a joke? I don't know, but I would like to think that metal isn't just exclusive to the young. Well, today, maybe, but the fact that First Lady was saying I like Ozzy's stuff at that time, that to me is pretty interesting. So that made the list.
What's more interesting to me is George W. hanging out with Ozzy. Like, when did that happen? Were they doing coke? They were totally doing coke, weren't they? Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, George W. He used to party, right? I mean,
sure did. Number 4 for me is Bill Ward. You guys have been hearing me talk about how great he is all night. As a drummer, I've always looked up to him. He's just a badass. He beats his drums into pure submission, and he never misses a beat. His timing, his tempo are all impeccable. I'm a better drummer for having listened to his work. He's absolutely amazing. I wish I had. I think I saw them play one of the Ozfests as like the last reunion where he was in it. And he was in his 70s, and he was still kicking ass and still awesome.
That's
Bill Ward
amazing.
is an absolute beast. I didn't write him in here, so I'm just going to throw an asterisk. Geezer Butler totally fucking rolls too.
Yeah. I mean, they're just amazing musicians. Yeah. Amazing. That's awesome. Next, I have Black Sabbath, the song from their debut album. There's a line, the figure in black. This was a shadowy figure that bassist Geezer Butler claims to have seen after waking up from a nightmare. That scares the shit out of me, man. And I know, Mark, I know you agree with me.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, those are moments for our therapists, but that stuff scares me. So, yeah. but still, it made the list, so it had to impact me in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely, and I think to the point to the greater point you're making, the imagery, right? The ability to draw you into this macabre world that they really did create sonically. That's just a great example of their ability to do that. So,
insane.
Excellent choice.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm at choice number 3. It's going to be Randy Rhoads and the Blizzard of Oz. Blizzard's probably Ozzy's best solo work, and that's in large part to the classically trained guitarist from Quiet Riot, who gave his all. Most know him for Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley, but check out Goodbye to Romance. That song rules, as well as Suicide Solution. Randy was really a one-of-a-kind guitarist that had taken Ozzy sonically forward and really gave him new life. Not enough can be said about the fantastic work and life of Randy Rhoads.
Yeah. Life taken too soon. That's the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 for me is Gandalf. Their song, The Wizard, was inspired by Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty cool. Cool imagery, cool mystique about it. So that made my list.
Absolutely. No surprise to folks. I mentioned one of his records earlier, Dio. Rainbow was a cool enough band, but I don't know that we would have heard of them if Dio hadn't joined Sabbath, or at least they wouldn't have then later gotten the recognition. The two Dio records are absolutely amazing, as I mentioned before, and certainly
Right.
should not be overlooked because you think Ozzy is better. That's not the point. Plus, would we have gotten Dio's solo career had he not spent the time in Sabbath? So, or would it have been considered as prolific? It's really an interesting question. Certainly he wasn't taken as young, but a life lost way too soon because
Yeah.
Dio was not only an amazing singer, he was a complete gentleman and one of the
Oh,
best dudes in heavy metal.
Paisan, man. Paisan. Yeah. So
Yeah.
number two for me was number two for me is just the rehearsal. So in the early days, they would rehearse across from a movie theater. So they would get the idea to kind of make this scary music after seeing how fun people would have watching horror movies. That to me is so cool. That's a story that to me is just it's iconic. I could only imagine living in that moment, how cool that must have been to be rehearsing in the movie theater and to be creating this sound. I wish I could have seen that. That's all I could have say. So yeah, just a whole rehearsal that made my list.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. You think about something as simple as that, right? They practiced across from the movie theater. They got all these ideas to do horror movie like songs and grow it. And then we think about like our list last week of top 10 bassists and Cliff Burton, who was so interested in combining horror movies and heavy metal.
Yep.
And like we're drawing these lines from Black Sabbath to everything that happened after Black Sabbath because they are so amazing.
Oh, so amazing.
So my number one choice, and I'm not sure how this happened, if I went twice, if I skipped something. My number one choice, Black Sabbath gave us heavy metal, period.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's the number one thing in the Sabbathverse. Fucking heavy metal.
Oh man. Oh man. My number one, it's the bat. The bat. So in 82, Ozzy would just bite the head off a bat in Iowa. That creature was thought to be dead and was thrown on stage by a fan. And he was rushed to the medical center for rabies shots after. I mean, just think about that for a second, right? A fan throws a live bat on the stage, and he just decides to bite the head off that bat. I mean, that's an amazing story. Most people think you're joking when you say that, but it actually did happen, and that made my number one list. So, man, so many cool things. We probably could have done another 10 collectively about the band, but this was just so fantastic to talk about them.
Can I tell you what I love about the bat thing the most?
Tell me.
My favorite thing about the bat thing is how much Alice Cooper hates it.
Because of the chicken?
He did the chicken thing in like 79 where he threw the live chicken into the audience and
yes.
made short to pieces, and he was seen as being so extreme. And he was like the craziest guy out there. And then Ozzy bites the head off his bat, and Alice Cooper's just like, I'm not so crazy anymore. That's my Alice Cooper impression. Anyways, man, those were some great lists.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
What do we have in store for next week?
All right, my friend. We're going to talk about sports.
Aww.
No, the record.
Oh.
Yeah. By Huey Lewis and the News. Oh. Listen, I can't wait to talk about this. There's a lot of musical goodness on this album. And it personifies the 80s. It was all over when we were kids listening to it. It's a great record. I want to dive into it more. And there's going to be stay tuned because there's going to be a really cool top 10. And it's going to be special. Mark, are you amped for this?
Should be a real blast from the past, Frank.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Listen, check us out wherever you digest a podcast. Like and subscribe. All those other good things. Let us know what your thoughts are and stay safe. And of course, ciao.
To be continued.